Okay, so today we're going to talk about the battery, because I'm finding that my battery level is staying pretty low, and I wasn't really aware of it until one day when I came into the car and I turned it on and it gave me a battery notification on the telltale. And so I looked at the menu and it told me it was charged to like 40%, and it indicated in red. So today I'm going to show you where you can check the status of your battery and just kind of keep an eye on how it charges, because what I find is that you have to not drive just 20 minutes to get your battery to charge back up. You have to drive it quite a bit, but also it seems to use power while it's just sitting idle. And there's some things that you can check for to make sure that you're not unnecessarily draining your battery, and it has to do with the switches up above here, because you can leave accessories on that will just sit there and pull on the power even when you're not driving. So we're going to have a look at that, but first let's turn it on and see what we've got right now. So what you do is you go to the off-road menu, and you choose electrical, and you see my battery is currently at 52%, and it's indicated in red. Now, if your battery is anything below 60, it's going to show in red, which means it's going to charge quite a bit. Like right now, there's 33 amps going into the battery, and you'll see when it's normally charged up, or once it reaches 60% or above, it slows down to a much slower charge. So it knows that the battery is low, and it's going to put some energy into charging that battery up to get it to an acceptable level, which it thinks is about 60%. And then it just does a very slow charge. And frankly, the highest I've ever seen my battery be charged is about 76%. And that's after taking a 2-hour drive. So I think it's a little bit low. I think it should be at least 90%. I contacted my dealer, who said that the normal range is going to be anywhere from 75 to 90%, but I've never seen that elusive 90%. I know I've also seen comments on the forums about people thinking that they should be able to get it to 100%, but I think it's one of those things where the battery doesn't want to be 100% charged all of the time, because that just kind of wears it out. So anything up to like 80% should probably be good, but just know that you can actually check to see where your battery's at quite easily by going to the off-road menu and then choosing electrical. So we've gone from 52 up to 53, and we're going to go take a little drive and just see what happens in 20 minutes of driving, because I was always under the notion of, you get your car jump started or something like that, and I have not had to jump start this car. You get your car jump started, and then they say, go drive for 20 minutes and it'll charge the battery up. And I sort of assumed that that would really take care of it. Well, in the Grenadier, 20 minutes worth of driving will bring it up some, but it doesn't bring it up a lot. And so that's what we're going to kind of experience today. So let's go for a little drive. So overall, the Grenadier is still driving just fine. I'm enjoying it, and there's nothing new that's happened that's made me think anything differently of it. It's just kind of a fun thing to take out, and when I encounter people that have never seen one before, and that's pretty regular, it's amazing how many people still don't know that this vehicle exists, and I find that just a little curious. But it's always greeted with enthusiasm and curiosity. I don't have people reacting negatively like I've seen happen to people that drive some other electric trucks. just leave it at that. But I'm watching my battery. I'm up to 54%. And again, it's putting 18, 12, 11 amps. You can kind of, I've got that camera pointed at the control. And we're going to take a stroll down Bumpy Road today by the harbor. And again, just sort of remind people of how the Grenadier takes rough roads. Because it's funny, you know, sports cars don't like potholes. And the Grenadier just likes to tippy-toe over them. It's kind of fun. And so, you know, a little bit of noise, but I don't really have rattles, which was something I was concerned about, especially with a brand new car that, you know, they hadn't sort of maybe figured out. But they sort of figured it out pretty well. So, you know, here we are. I'm about 10 months in, something like that. And no rattles. And the acceleration and all the things that some people were concerned about that I've sort of not really have been a problem to me. The steering, you know, you can still drive it one-handed, and it, as far as correcting, the next time I do a turn, maybe we'll pay attention to what I'm actually doing, because it's second nature to me now. I've heard people say that they can't keep it on the road and things, and that's just not my experience. So I'm not sure if they've got something different going on, but I basically have gotten my Grenadier, and it hasn't been back in for service since I initially picked it up, and we're at about 10 months in. I did, however, get my recall notice today. Just as I was coming down to the car, I got my recall notice for the door buttons, because I knew that my Grenadier was in the early 2024 production that included that problem. So it's interesting. I've only seen some brief information about it, but it sounds like they don't have the parts available at the moment. And I'll try and verify that before I conclude this video. But basically, anybody who has a 2024 will have door buttons replaced through all the way around the car. And the way that in the US, that the recalls work, the new ones sitting on dealer lots can't be sold until that problem is remedied. So that's probably where the parts are going first, because they obviously have to be able to sell the inventory, and if it's affected, it has to be remedied before it can be sold to a customer once the recall has been declared. So I just don't find steering to be a problem. I still don't like the turning radius, don't get me wrong. It's really far too wide, and that's the only difficulty, is parking lots. Parking lots, you have to kind of turn and angle, and instead of a 3-point turn, it becomes a 5-point turn. It's a big vehicle, so I guess some of that's to be expected. So it's not quite as nimble on its feet in that way. But as far as not being responsive with the steering, it's not my experience. And the only thing that I find is there's one button on the steering wheel, the microphone button. It's far out to the edge of the steering wheel, and I tend to one-hand turn when I'm doing something in a parking lot, and I tend to hit that button, and it sets Siri off. That's about the size of it. It could be a little bit better placed, but it's not a deal breaker. So let's go around. We got more trucking going on down here, because this is where they build the ships and things like that. But I just thought this would give us an opportunity to see how long I need to drive to get my battery up to an acceptable level. And by the time I'm done with this video, I'd like to see it at 60%, but I'm not going to drag it out just for the benefit of that. Normally a trip from San Diego to Los Angeles should clearly charge the battery fully, but I've never seen it go beyond something with an 8 in front of it, 80 some percent. And so, first I thought, well, is this a problem? I don't know. I've never had my Grenadier not turn on. And, I go to Europe for a month and I come back and the car turns on. But that's kind of where my concern is coming from. And I did have a company approach me about doing a video, a sponsored video, where they make like trickle chargers that you put on your roof or on your hood. And I really wasn't particularly interested in that, but it is something that exists, and I'll leave a link in the description. But basically it's like a solar panel that fits the outline of your hood, and then it trickle charges your Grenadier, which is great if you're parking out in the sun. I obviously park in an underground parking structure, and there's nothing that's going to charge my battery while it's sitting there parked. I do have that some other people have reported a little bit of noise from the HVAC system. As I said in an earlier video, it's a little quirky. Sometimes you ask for heat and you get cold, or you get heat and then occasional blips of cold, which makes no sense. But sometimes you have to turn it all the way one way or the other way in order to get it to wake up and take note of what you've asked it to do. It doesn't seem to like the instructions so well. It works. You can get it to work. It's just it requires a little bit of finesse and finagling. And I don't think I use the auto mode so much, because sometimes if you get in a car that's been parked in the sun and it's warm, it just goes overboard on trying to cool it down, and the fans go to high, and it doesn't seem to be a helpful experience, let's just put it that way. So I rather be in control of it and say I want the fan at 2, and I want the temperature to be 3/4 of the way towards cool. And the only other thing that I noticed about the whistle is sometimes if you change the direction of the air, meaning if you want it to blow it towards your face or towards your feet, that moving that selector, opening and closing the little vents, is probably where that whistle is coming from. That there's a little bit of air escaping and it's not being totally locked in. So that's just something that you might want to play around with, because I found that I didn't have any whistle. I did have a whistle, and then I didn't have a whistle, and then I was kind of searching for information about the whistle and saw some suggestions about changing the direction of the airflow, and by playing with it a little bit, it changed the dynamic of the airflow and the whistle. And it's hard to know if it's something like, see, I just turned it all the way to feet and I'm getting no whistle. So something for you to play with. Again, I'm not super annoyed by it, but it's not super loud either. I've heard it when I first got my Grenadier, it seemed kind of loud, but maybe it was one of those things where you just needed to use it a little bit, and then that kind of mellowed it out, because I do get a tiny whistle at certain times. I move it back to, that's upper, a little bit of whistle, kind of reminds me of a little windstorm, and then I just put it to split air, and now I don't hear a whistle. So that's just kind of a curious thing, and it's something for you to kind of keep an eye on. The hot and cold business, it just seems to be a feature. Maybe it's a bug, but overall the system works. It had they recharged it when I first got the Grenadier, and it's never had a problem since. And that was my bigger concern, was that I'd get in the car and it just wouldn't cool. And that's not been a problem. Okay, so looking at our battery, we're at 55%. And that seems to, I see currently 7 amps going into the battery, and it just sort of fluctuates depending on what's going on, and because other electrics are taking place. So anyway, it's helpful to have that information, and you can just go to off-road, electrical, and you can see exactly where your battery's at. And I only learned about that when I got a report from my Telltale that my battery level was low, and that it thought it was kind of critical. But that was, I think the lowest I've ever seen it was 40%. And that was after being gone for quite some time. Now, when it comes to the switches up here, the power switch, if it's on the on position, any accessories that you have will remain powered when the car is off. And you probably don't want that except for very specific times. So I've learned that I have the exterior, the internal switches. One of them I have on because I've got the chargers here and the USB power, and that's switched to the interior power that I wired, that was built into the footwell. And I leave that on, but I leave the power switch off because that power switch really only engages when the car is off. So when the car is on, there's power to these switches over here. But when the car is off, that's when this power switch comes into play. And you want to make sure that you switch it off when you're not driving the car, and you don't need to have that power, because whatever is being powered through these switches will continue to be powered, and that can cause a drain on your battery. So some people find that their battery keeps draining pretty rapidly, and they'll take it to the dealer, and the dealer's like, looks at the switches and says, that you've got the power turned on even when the car's off. And if you have a little something plugged in, lighting, or I'm not sure, some accessory, that's where your power drain could be coming from. So you want to sort of isolate that. And I don't see that my Wolfbox rearview mirror causes any drain because it was put on the other side of power. It's not switched through here. Oh dear, I'm going a little too far. I'm going to end up at the border if I'm not careful. So we're going to get on the freeway briefly, but then we're going to get off and turn around. Actually, I'm almost to the INEOS Grenadier dealer. So we might as well go down the street and drive past the INEOS dealer, see what they've got sitting on the lot, because I've gotten that far. And I recognize I'm one of the fortunate ones that the dealer, this is the closest I've ever lived to one of my car selling dealers. And with the Grenadier, that kind of gave me comfort in going forward with the purchase. So occasionally you might notice on my panel that it says I'm 78 days overdue for service. And I mentioned it when I first discovered it, but basically the service counter began the day that your Grenadier rolled off the factory line, if they didn't reset it when you bought it. So my Grenadier turned 1 year old 78 days ago. Of course, I was going to wait a year basically till I got my first service, because I'm not a high mileage driver. And so when I had a conversation with my dealer the other day, my intent, unless there's something, that warrants it, is just to go in closer to my 1 year anniversary to have a service and any warranty work, because I do have a little punch list, and I'm going to have them look at the air conditioner and some things like that, and just double check the battery and see if any of these things that people report that I experience but I'm not bothered by, but to see if they're technical issues or just behaving as normal? Because I sort of like to know that. And, you know, I'd rather report something and have them say, no, the car's operating as it should. And, you know, whether you agree or not, for example, the power steering sound that's kind of whiny, I hear it. I know how to get it to make that noise. You don't hear it when you're in the car. You hear it maybe when you're in a parking lot. And so that's why it's kind of annoying. If the windows are down and you're in a parking lot, you hear this high-pitched noise. And so it's one of those things. It's like, well, I want to make sure that it's doing what it should be doing. Now, it's interesting. I have not had one overspeed warning this entire trip. And I don't know if it's because I didn't go overspeed, which I find hard to believe. I mean, I'm not going crazy here, but I'm not getting the tick, 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 tick. And I've found that happen a couple of times where I get in the car and it's already turned off from the last time I turned it off. It didn't turn back on. And I don't know why. I'm not complaining about it, but I certainly don't have any software update yet. That was another conversation we had. And apparently, depending on when your Grenadier was manufactured, it's in a phase 1 or a phase 2, and it's a different software update. And any Grenadier, I think, that's coming out of the factory at 25 already has it where you can turn it off, and the software's already been updated because they're manufacturing them that way. And I actually just heard that the 2026s will actually have some sort of button. They said a button on the head unit. I'm not sure if that's this or down here. Much like the auto start stop. And so that would be the first reason to get a 2026. But you got to wait a while for that because it's something that they're going to roll in. But as far as the software update, it was supposed to happen in Q1. It's still on its way. It's acknowledged that it's still coming as recently as last week. So I'm confident it will be there. I will be happy to be able to turn it off and not hear the sound. And again, I think that you'll be able to turn the sound off, but you'll still probably see the flash on the instrument panel because at some level in some countries it's required. And I guess the problem was also in some countries it's not required and they got it anyway. And I know I have viewers in countries where they don't have ADAS requirements and they're just annoyed by it, and I can understand why. And if you have a 2023 model, which means you were probably in the UK, you don't have it because they didn't have the ADAS in 2023. It only started with 2024s. So here we are. Just do a slow scan. We have a G-Wagon on the lot, which means somebody traded their G-Wagon for a Grenadier. Well, that's interesting. Okay, and here is a U-turn. That I'm not going to make, and this is probably one of the only things that I really don't like. And so I'll do a left turn and a left turn. I'll do a left turn and then go to a side street and turn around instead of doing that in traffic. Because if it were traffic hour and there were a lot of cars, nobody wants to be backing up in an intersection in a quick moment. And so that's probably the biggest negative that I can find. And it's sort of inherent to the car. So not much to be done about it. But it's the only thing that gives me a little angst. I've gotten used to parking garages. It's really easy. You just check the height. You make sure that you're at the right height. And parking spaces, you can navigate it pretty well. It just, it's like learning a bigger vehicle. But it's not, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm driving a truck with a big something behind me. It just doesn't quite have that. But the turning radius, I could wish for something different. So anyway, that was a quick drive by the dealer. What are we at? 57%. So now we're heading back towards home, about 6, 7, 8 miles. And we'll do a little freeway. But as you can see, it's not just racing to charge that battery up, because we started at 52 and we're at 57. All right, let's go. Acceleration, not a problem. It's not a rocket car, not a rocket, but it doesn't need to be. And I mean, for as heavy as it is, it gets up and goes. I don't find that this needs a bigger engine. Might be fun to have a bigger engine, but it doesn't need one. Another frequent question I get is about freeway noise, and I don't find it unacceptable. I can even talk on the phone, through the Bluetooth and have a conversation, and I can hear. Now, if you're driving at, like we're at 55, if I go to 65, let's see if I can in this traffic, you can tell that there's an increase in the amount of wind noise, but with a flat windshield, that's just what's going to happen. That's kind of unavoidable. But again, I mean, I don't have the radio on, and it's funny, I tend to drive this car without the radio on. Maybe it's because I'm doing this or I'm listening for sounds, but I think a lot of it would be masked if you had something playing on the stereo. Let's see, let's go a little faster. So, see, that's 74 being passed. Love it. Good old California. But I just don't find the external noise to be horrific. I think it's pretty acceptable, because I know people that haven't had the opportunity to drive one a lot have questions like this, and I try to answer what I know and not make things up. But I just, another thing that I recommend for people is, if you're going to test drive one, tell the dealer that you're going to want to take an extended test drive, because at first, the only time I ever drove the Grenadier before I bought it, the day I bought it, was on an off-road prototype event, and it didn't really tell me how this thing was going to handle on the road. We did ruts and dirt and soft dirt and things like that, but it didn't tell me how it was going to behave in the real world, the 5 freeway, the 405, that kind of stuff. And so the day that I went to pick up the car, I took it out for about an hour and a half, and we drove it around. I even made a video of it. It's not a good video, but it's a video, because I needed to see what it was like, and not just drive it around the block. And I recommend that if you're interested in, and I know that a lot of people don't live just down the road from a Grenadier dealer, so just plan to go and spend time and let the dealer know that you want to take an extended test drive, because that's really, get on a freeway, get on some streets, drive over some potholes, just kind of get your feel for it. And also, when it comes to the steering, that the very first time you turn a corner and it doesn't just spring back, it can be a little off-putting. but you'll find within 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe even quicker, that you'll adapt to it and it won't feel so odd, because it's just different. It's not wrong. And getting a longer drive with the Grenadier really helps to kind of bear that out, because I basically consider, this is my daily driver, because I kind of transitioned my life to where I just don't need to drive all the time. And one of the reasons I moved back to San Diego from LA was I put myself in a place where I could walk a lot, because hey, it's better for you, and if you don't need to get in a car, don't. And so I that's kind of my ethos nowadays. So I used to have a couple of cars and they just sit and don't do anything. So at this point, one's enough, and I want to just make sure that the battery stays charged. But I suppose that's also why I'm not so bothered by the fuel mileage, because it's a thirsty car. But the only part that I truthfully dislike about it is that it tells you that you should buy fuel long before I think it should tell you that you're going to need to buy fuel. You probably still have, a third of a tank left. And if you live in somewhere rural, that is probably helpful information. But if you're living at a place where there's a gas station pretty regularly, it's annoying. And then the warnings get more persistent as it goes. And not a fan. I understand it. But those are things I wish that I could set. Say, give me a warning when it thinks that I have, X number of miles left. Because that would solve the problem, and it would make me happy, and it would make other customers happy that wish they had the long head notice. I also, getting, service reminder, it could come on when I first turn the car on, and it could go away. It doesn't need to come up every 5 minutes, because it basically blocks. See, there it comes up. It says I have service overdue 78 days. And it tells me I'm looking for my trip meter or my odometer. I can't see it. And then it comes back. So those kinds of things, it's just a little annoying at the information. It gives you a lot of information. And, that's a modern day car thing. But I think those are things that they could refine a little bit, because they don't need to be telling me every other minute that I need to get service. They can tell me when I turn the car on, and I'll see it, and I'll acknowledge it, and I'll process the way I need to process. We've been recording for 48 minutes, of which I will be editing down, but we have gone from 52% to 58%. That's it. 48 minutes. So that's kind of the thing that I want you to be aware of, is that your car battery will regenerate and charge back up, but it doesn't do it fast at all. So a little trip to the market and back is not going to bring your battery back up to a decent level. I really have to do some driving to get this thing back up into even the yellow zone, which is 60% or above. And I wish that were different. And it's something that I'm going to address with my dealer when I take it in for that first service. But I just sort of wanted to point out that it's something that you're going to want to maybe know about if you don't drive your car. Because I know some Grenadier owners, they have multiple cars. They don't drive every car every day. And so there are, different ways to approach it. But putting it in the rotation is obviously good for the health of the Grenadier. Well, that's it for now. I'm going to keep my eye on the percentage. Currently, we're at 58%. We started 50 minutes ago at 52%. And just be aware that your Grenadier needs a little time to regenerate its battery. And so if you're an infrequent driver, it's something that you're going to want to pay more attention to. But again, going to the off-road menu, and these little dots on the side take you to the different off-road menus. Like you can see the time, the pressure and temperature of your tires and so forth. But the very last one is the electrical. And so it's easy to find. So anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you've experienced anything like this, because I'd like to see what other people have experienced and if it's been a problem or just something that they have to keep their eye on. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.